When you embrace uncertainty, life becomes easier. Montaigne, let go of certainty. What if the very thing you're doing to feel safe is what's stealing your peace? In a world obsessed with control, it's easy to believe that planning every detail, mastering emotions, and avoiding discomfort will keep us safe. But what if that mindset is the root of your exhaustion? Inspired by the quiet wisdom of Michel de Montaigne, this video is not a lecture, it's an invitation to release the impossible burden of control. We'll explore the quiet strength of surrender, the courage of ambiguity, and the radical healing power of saying, I don't know. This isn't about weakness, it's about finding your way back to what's real. Stay with us, because the moment you stop clinging is the moment you begin to breathe. When you try to control life, you're losing your inner peace. Have you ever wondered why you constantly feel exhausted? Even when everything in your life seems to be okay, you might be living in an invisible whirlpool where you try to control every little detail, tomorrow's plans, other people's emotions, your own future. You think that control will bring you safety. But what you're gradually losing is your inner peace. Society teaches us that strength comes from having control, but Montaigne offered a different view. He didn't seek power over the outside world, but turned inward to where true chaos begins. He faced instability head-on instead of denying it, and in doing so, he found freedom. The obsession with control doesn't just make you tense. It creates the illusion that if you just try hard enough, you can avoid failure, pain, and loss. But life doesn't work that way. And when reality doesn't follow your plan, you don't just feel disappointed, you blame yourself. Feel inadequate, not good enough. Montaigne invites you to set that burden down. Instead of asking, how can I control this? Ask, how can I be present with it? Because peace doesn't lie in mastering everything, it lies in accepting that you can't. And you don't have to. Life doesn't need to be controlled for you to live it truthfully. You only need the courage to let go and trust that in letting go, you'll find your way back to yourself. Uncertainty doesn't destroy you, denial does. There's a truth that most of us try to ignore. Life has never guaranteed anyone a clear path. There are no promises about tomorrow. There's no perfect map for the road you're on, and that in itself makes us uneasy. From childhood, you were taught to be certain what to study, what career to pursue, who to love, how to live, that the more you know, the more you calculate, the safer you'll be. But life doesn't follow that logic. Life isn't a math problem, it's a current. And that current doesn't care how prepared you are. Montaigne understood this well. He lived through a time of great turmoil, where change was a constant and no one could control it. But instead of resisting, he observed himself. He didn't run from ambiguity, he lived with it, wrote through it, and grew from it. What hurts you isn't uncertainty, it's the expectation of certainty. It's believing that you must know, must be right, must be ready. You place impossible demands on yourself, then beat yourself up when life refuses to follow the script. You're not just scared you feel like a failure, but if you stop and look closer, you'll realize that pain doesn't come from the outside, it comes from the inner denial. When you begin to accept that not knowing is normal, that uncertainty is a natural part of being. You begin to breathe easier. Uncertainty doesn't kill you. On the contrary, it's where life truly begins. When you stop searching for guarantees, you start discovering freedom. Not freedom outside, but a deep release in the mind. And sometimes, that's the only real safety we ever need. Montaigne, the inner explorer, in a world obsessed with certainty, when the world was chasing after absolute truths, Montaigne chose the opposite path, not through rebellion, but through quietly turning inward. While society was searching for answers, he chose to live with the questions, not because he wasn't smart enough to know, but because he was brave enough to admit, some things never have clear answers. He didn't write down truths. He didn't build philosophies. He didn't declare anything as certain. Montaigne lived like a wanderer, not across roads outside, but within the maze of his own mind. He was the first to face his inner world without weapons, without a shell, without excuses. In a small room, surrounded by silent books, he observed himself like an unstable creature full of contradictions, fears, and things he couldn't explain. But instead of being ashamed, he wrote, and instead of hiding the parts he didn't know, he placed them on paper as essential pieces of the human experience. In our time where everyone is expected to be consistent, to know who they are, what they want, and where they're going, Montaigne's act was a quiet revolution. He didn't live to prove anything. He lived to explore. We don't need to be philosophers to do the same. We only need to be honest with ourselves and courageous enough to step into the dark where all the answers disappear. Montaigne didn't offer certainty, he offered permission to be lost, to be unclear, to change. And sometimes that alone is enough to begin our truest journey. I don't know. And that's when I could breathe for the first time. There's a phrase that sounds simple, but it opens the door to inner freedom. I don't know. In a world where everyone tries to appear certain, knowledgeable, firm, and planned, that phrase sounds like an admission of weakness. But to Montaigne, it was the starting point of a more authentic life. When you stop and accept that you don't know about the future, about others, about yourself, you don't lose power, you reclaim your ability to breathe. That phrase is like a long sigh of relief after years of pretending. You no longer have to fake understanding when you don't, or pretend you're okay when your insides are in chaos. You don't have to act anymore. Montaigne wasn't afraid to admit his ambiguity. In fact, he saw it as a sign of aliveness. For him, real knowledge wasn't about how much you knew. It was about daring to say, I don't know, and still being able to live peacefully with that truth. I don't know isn't the end of thought. It's the beginning of true thinking. Free from bias, free from role-playing, free from forcing yourself into molds that no longer fit. It's an invitation to open inner space where you're allowed to ask questions, allowed to not have answers, and still be fully alive. When you say, I don't know with sincerity, you shed the armor of false certainty the world made you wear, and in that moment, you stop fighting to be someone. You simply become yourself. And in that simplicity, something magical appears, peace, a feeling you've always searched for, but never gave yourself permission to touch until now. Contradiction isn't shameful, it's a sign that you're growing. We often think that to mature, we must be consistent, that the wise person is someone who never changes their stance, never wavers, never doubts. But the truth is, the human mind isn't a straight road. It's a maze full of turns. And Montaigne, with rare honesty, taught us that. He wrote things that contradicted one another. Things that were true to him one day, he would dismiss the next. But he felt no shame. He didn't erase the past, didn't edit himself to please the reader, because he understood change isn't betrayal of self. On the contrary, it's proof you're still alive, still watching, still feeling, still growing. There are beliefs you once held deeply. Then, with more experience, you changed. And now you feel confused, afraid others will see you as unstable or weak. But here's the truth, only dead minds don't contradict themselves. The living ones. They're still learning, adjusting, experimenting, in search of who they really are. We must learn to embrace change as a natural part of evolution. Contradiction is evidence that you've outgrown an old frame. It's a sign you're shedding the layers of dogma and reaching for something more real. Montaigne gave himself permission to be wrong, and in doing so, gave you that same permission. Not because being wrong is the goal, but because it's an essential part of discovering your truth. You don't need to be right all the time to deserve respect. You just need to be real, with your emotions, with your thoughts, with your ongoing process. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful form of maturity. When you fear ambiguity, you're rejecting life itself. There's a kind of fatigue that has no name. It doesn't come from work or external chaos. It comes from inside you. From your effort to clarify what cannot be clarified, to control what cannot be held, to avoid the fact that life is an ongoing state of ambiguity. You feel anxious when you don't know what others are thinking. You feel uneasy when your plans fall apart. You panic when a nameless emotion arises and you don't know where it came from. And then you blame yourself. You think something is wrong with you, when in fact, these are simply the normal signs of being human. Montaigne didn't show you how to escape ambiguity. He didn't build a system to decode the world. Instead, He invited you to live with uncertainty, not as a punishment, but as fertile soil for inner freedom and creativity. We fear ambiguity because it makes us feel small. But in that smallness, you have the chance to live truthfully, no longer straining to know everything, to understand everything, to answer every question before it's even asked. You're allowed not to be sure. And that permission is what allows you to truly be present. The cost of running from ambiguity isn't just exhaustion, it's shutting the door on experiences that might help you grow. Every time you force yourself to be certain, you miss the opportunity to listen, to experiment, to change. You don't need to know everything to live. You only need the courage to step into the unknown as a survival act of a soul ready to mature. Because sometimes the first step to finding yourself is accepting that you're lost, and that's okay. The mask called I'm Fine is. What's draining you? You've probably said it before, I'm fine, even when everything inside you was falling apart. You smiled while your mind was overwhelmed with anxiety. You nodded, kept working, kept talking, as if everything was under control. But the truth is, you're exhausted from pretending to be strong. Society doesn't encourage you to be honest about your fears. You're praised when you stay calm, admired when emotions don't sway you, trusted when you make quick decisions over time. You learn to wear the mask of stability as if any sign of fluctuation is weakness. Montaigne didn't live that way. He wrote about his insecurities with raw honesty. He spoke of his fear of death, his confusion in thought, his shifting perspectives without hiding any of it. He didn't try to build the image of a stable man. He simply tried to be honest with who he truly was. You don't always have to be the composed one. You don't have to be strong all the time. You're allowed to pause, to be unclear, to be vulnerable, and still be worthy of love, respect, and living your truth. The I'm fine mask might help you escape awkward situations for a moment, but wear it too long, and you'll forget the face beneath. You'll start living in a role, and that's what truly drains you. The stability society admires may just be a frozen version of your true self, but you, a real human being, are still flowing, changing, and needing to breathe. Try taking off the mask. Let someone, or even just yourself, see the imperfect, unready, uncertain version of you, because that's where true freedom and healing begin. Listening to the darkness, the beginning of healing. We're often taught how to overcome, but rarely taught how to listen, especially when what needs to be heard isn't outside, but deep within the tangled emotions, the conflicting thoughts, the wordless wounds. We push them down, dismiss them, deny them because they're too hard to face. Montaigne didn't choose that path. He didn't try to erase the dark parts of himself. On the contrary, he acknowledged them, wrote about them, and from there, found a more authentic way to live. Darkness was no longer something to hide, it became something to understand. Listening to the darkness doesn't mean letting it consume you. It means no longer fighting yourself. It means sitting down, not judging your sadness, not rejecting your anxiety, not banishing the feelings that quietly knock at your door. It's saying to yourself, I see it, I'm here with it, and that's okay. We cannot heal without knowing where we're hurt, and we can't know if we keep turning away from what we don't want to see. Darkness is not the enemy. It's the forgotten part waiting for you to return. Look at it and embrace it. Every time you allow a negative emotion to exist without running, you open a small door to healing. It's not quick, it's not easy, but it's the only way to live truthfully without pretending, without performing, without taping on the I'm fine label. The healing journey begins by pausing, by releasing the pressure to overcome, and instead accepting that some wounds don't need to be erased, only understood and accompanied. It's when you sit still in the dark, that's when you finally begin to see yourself. Accepting imperfection, the path toward truth. There's a paradox many people don't realize. The more you strive for perfection, the further you drift from yourself. Society builds ideals around wisdom, emotional control, unwavering strength, and in your pursuit of validation, you start to believe you're only worthy when you approach these ideals. But the truth is, what makes you human is not perfection, it's your willingness to embrace the parts of yourself that are still incomplete. Montaigne never claimed to be perfect. In every page he wrote, he revealed cracks, shifting opinions, irrational fears, fragile moments. He didn't hide them. He made them visible because he knew only when we stop proving who we are do we truly begin to live as ourselves. Accepting imperfection isn't giving up on growth. It's the foundation for honest maturity. It's when you can say, I'm learning, I'm unsure, and I'm still worthy. Not because you've arrived, but because you showed up. Those who always try to be strong, correct, in control are often the loneliest inside because they don't dare let anyone see their fragility. But that very fragility is what creates true connection. Only when you admit you're not okay do you open the door for others to step in, not to fix you, but to walk with you. You don't need to eliminate your flaws to be a worthy version of yourself. You only need to face them and not turn away. In that gaze, healing begins in that acceptance. You no longer need to prove anything. You just need to be you, a person who is alive, learning, and still opening their heart to all that's unfinished. And that is the truest form of wholeness. Everything changes. And that's why you still have a chance to live truthfully. Many people dream of a stable life where everything is certain, emotions are clear, relationships never fracture. And the future is mapped out like a blueprint. We think if everything stays still, we'll finally be at peace. But Montaigne understood something else. Change is the very thing that gives you a chance to live truthfully. We often see change as a threat. It breaks routine, pushes us out of our comfort zones, forces us to rewrite our plans. But if you look closely, you'll see it's in those disruptions that we pause, reflect, and ask what in us is still real and what is just habit. Montaigne didn't just accept change, he honored it. He believed that a truth today could be wrong tomorrow. A way of life that works today may no longer bring vitality tomorrow. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're evolving. The stability you're chasing might not be peace. It might be stagnation. And stagnation shrinks your soul, closes your heart, and turns you into a shadow of yourself. Change is a sign that you're still alive, proof that the world hasn't closed off to you, an invitation to pause and ask, am I still living in alignment with myself? And if the answer is no, then that changes your doorway back. You don't need to fear the falling apart. Remember, only when old leaves fall can new buds emerge. Real life begins when you stop clinging to stillness and start flowing with the ever-changing aliveness within you. Letting go isn't weakness. It's the kind of strength more flexible than steel. We often equate strength with control, that the strong person is the one who never wavers, never bends, always stays in charge. But Montaigne offers another view. Sometimes, true strength lies not in holding on, but in letting go, like a bamboo that bends with the wind without breaking. Humans are truly resilient when we learn to be flexible with life. You might be used to planning everything, controlling your time, your emotions, even other people. But then a sudden event strikes and everything shatters. In that moment, if you're rigid, you break. But if you know how to yield, you rise again. Letting go isn't giving up, it's a conscious mindset. I accept what's beyond my power, and I hold on to what I can master: my reaction, my attitude, my inner choices. Montaigne didn't avoid uncertainty. He didn't run from chaos. He simply didn't resist the natural flow of life, and that's what made him quietly unshakable. You don't need to control every shift to prove you're strong. You just need to be like water, fluid, soft, yet never losing your essence. What's too rigid breaks. What adapts lives on. Letting go is when you realize true resilience doesn't come from gripping everything, but from knowing what to keep and what to release. And in that moment of loosening your grip, you finally open your hands to receive something deeper, fresher, truer. It's not loss. It's the beginning of a different kind of strength. The strength of inner freedom. Philosophy doesn't make you smarter. It makes you lighter to live truthfully. To many, philosophy seems lofty, dry, reserved for scholars. But to Montaigne, philosophy wasn't an academic discipline. It was a way of living, a survival tool, a quiet exit from the chaos within. He didn't write to prove he knew more than others. He wrote to understand himself, to make sense of nameless sadness, vague anxiety. the feeling of loneliness even while present in the world. And the more he wrote, the more he realized philosophy doesn't make you superior, it makes you gentler with yourself. True philosophy doesn't add more to your mind. It peels away the layers of illusion society planted in your head since childhood, that you must be strong, in control, certain. It lifts the weight off your shoulders, those unanswered questions, unreachable expectations, and standards that never truly fit. Montaigne didn't care about being the most correct, the most rational, or the sharpest. He cared about one thing: how do I live better with myself? How do I breathe freely amidst the performances of life? How do I face ambiguity and keep walking? And from those questions, he discovered something simple. Living truthfully never required brilliance, only honesty, with your feelings, with your fears, with your longing to live a life that's not too heavy. In Montaigne's hands, philosophy wasn't used to build an image. It was used to dissolve it, to stop pretending, to pause long enough to hear the quietest voice inside you whispering, I just want to live truthfully, lightly, and enough. You don't need to be wise, just honest with yourself. We often think that in order to live well, we must understand deeply, hold tightly, think critically, and see far. But Montaigne didn't care about that kind of external wisdom. He didn't write like a man teaching you how to live, but like someone learning how to live every day by being radically honest with himself. He wasn't afraid of contradiction. He wasn't afraid of changing his mind. He didn't shy away from confusion or even from thoughts that might seem trivial, because to him, nothing true arises from trying to appear profound. Only honesty opens the path that connects the mind to the heart. You don't need to understand everything to live deeply. You don't need a reason for every emotion you experience. Some days you'll feel lost, vague, unsure of where you're heading, and that doesn't mean you're doing life wrong. It simply means you're alive. You're being honest with your own process, without rushing it, without dressing it up. Montaigne wrote like a silent friend, not pointing out your flaws, not offering hollow advice, but simply recounting his inner journey without hiding anything. And in that honesty, readers feel something rare: permission to stop trying to be perfect. You don't need to be okay to begin. You just need to sit with yourself as you are. No hiding, no fixing, just enough honesty to name your sadness. Enough courage not to run from your fear. And enough gentleness to say, I don't understand everything, but I'm still here with myself. Wisdom may make others admire you, but honesty, that's what heals you. Because it doesn't ask you to become someone. It simply invites you to return. Let go of the answer, and you'll hear yourself for the first time. We grow up in a world that demands answers. Every question must be solved. Every problem must have a solution. Every unstable emotion must be understood. And so you become used to reacting right away, trying to explain, define, and label everything happening within you. But the more you try to find answers, the further you drift from your true inner voice. You begin to live by pre-made templates, react the right way, act according to what you were taught. And in the middle of all that reason, you lose something vital, your connection to yourself. Montaigne chose another path. He didn't try to answer every existential question. On the contrary, he allowed himself to live with the questions sometimes, for a lifetime without needing to resolve them. He understood some things in life aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be felt. Not every outburst of anger needs a cause. Not every sadness can be decoded, but all of them deserve to be acknowledged. Letting go of the need to understand everything doesn't make you passive. It makes you a better listener, because when you're no longer busy chasing answers, you finally begin to sense the real question that's living inside you. And that's when your inner voice, the small one you've ignored for far too long, finally speaks. It doesn't use wise words. It whispers through presence, through sensation, through breath. And when you sit with it still, real, you realize sometimes no answer is needed. You just need to show up. Stop explaining and start listening. In that very moment, you stop trying to become someone. You are simply alive, simple, light, and real. Letting go of old assumptions, the beginning of a more authentic life. There are beliefs you've carried for years, not because they're true, but because they're familiar. The belief that you must always be strong, that you must know exactly who you are, what you're doing, and where you're going. That emotional instability is a sign of failure. That change equals defeat. These assumptions, repeated by society, family, and your own inner voice, have silently become the structure through which you view the world. But Montaigne, with quiet courage, taught us every framework must be questioned if we truly wish to be free. He didn't cling to old conclusions. Every new experience, every new thought could shift his perspective, not because he was weak, but because he was flexible. Not because he lacked conviction, but because he understood humans are living beings, not machines that must operate flawlessly forever. When you dare to release old assumptions, you begin to realize many of the things that once hurt you weren't actually that big. You just lived inside a mental structure that was too narrow. Once you dissolve that, you no longer need to force yourself into a perfect version. That's when you begin again, not by starting over, but by living for the first time as yourself, not the person society expected, not the person you tried to become to be loved, to be accepted, but your actual self, vague, alive, ever-changing. Endings are not always losses, sometimes. Endings are the necessary cracks through which real life can emerge. And in that ending of old beliefs, old expectations, the old ego, a more truthful life is quietly beginning. Here, you don't need to be perfect. You only need to be present. And that is enough. Not being in control doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong. There's a deeply rooted misunderstanding in our minds that strong people are those who are always in control of situations, of emotions, of their entire lives. That when you let go, you're giving up. That when you stop resisting, you're weak. But Montaigne, with sensitivity and sharp insight, revealed something else. It's precisely in not being in control that your true strength is revealed. Strength isn't about mastering everything. It's about standing firm amid what cannot be mastered. It's not about crushing your fears, but about daring to face them. It's not about banishing pain, but about embracing it with deep calm. When you constantly seek control, your mind is always tense, always on alert, always reacting, always defensive. That doesn't make you stronger, it just makes you exhausted. You become an internal supervisor, never allowed to relax, never allowed to be wrong, never allowed to be vulnerable, even for a moment. Montaigne chose a different path. He didn't try to master his inner world. He learned to live with it. He didn't force himself to be clear, righteous, or stable. He accepted that sometimes he was still lost, still fragile, still changing every day. And in that acceptance, a quiet inner strength arose. True courage isn't in the ones who control everything. It's in those who aren't afraid to lose control, because they know beneath all the changes, the chaos, the undercurrents of life, there is always one thing they can return to, their connection with themselves. Letting go of control doesn't mean abandoning life. It means trusting in its flow. It means you no longer fight reality, you walk with it, steady and unforced. And in that walk, you're no longer the one clenching everything. You become someone who is truly free from within. Healing begins with one question: what are you trying so hard for? Have you ever asked yourself, what am I trying so hard for? Why do I put so much effort into being stable, strong, knowledgeable, never revealing the confusion inside? Maybe it's because you fear losing your way. But deeper down, maybe you're trying to avoid a wound that was never named. Montaigne didn't ask questions to find answers in the world. He turned inward, starting from the most human feelings, fear, doubt, vulnerability. He didn't try to fix himself to fit in. He didn't force himself to improve for the approval of others. He simply wanted to understand, what am I living for? Who am I trying to prove myself to, and why? Healing begins there. When you pause in the rush and ask, is this anxiety mine, or is it a legacy passed down to me? This need to be solid. Does it come from a true desire to live authentically, or just from the wish to never be hurt again? So much of what you do today is actually a defense. You try to control things to avoid repeating past pain. You harden yourself to be seen, to be accepted. But the more you try, the further you drift from your true inner feeling. Montaigne taught us, no healing begins in denial. Healing isn't about becoming better. It's about looking at yourself honestly, gently. It's when you stop and ask, what part of me is being forgotten? What am I working so hard for? And is it worth the cost of losing myself? When you dare to ask, not to explain, but to listen, you'll see behind the strength is a heart that once hurt, and behind the hurt, a deep longing to live honestly, gently, to be loved without trying so hard anymore. And maybe, in admitting that the real journey of healing finally begins, the psychological biases that are silently exhausting you. We live in a society that glorifies clarity, decisiveness, and rational thinking, to the point where natural expressions of human psychology are seen as things that need fixing. You're sad, that's weakness. You changed your mind, you lack conviction. You don't know what you want, you've failed. These judgments creep into everyday speech, into the way we evaluate others and ourselves. But Montaigne showed us humans are not machines built on logic. We contradict ourselves. We're emotional. We change. Sometimes we're messy. And that doesn't make us wrong. It makes us real. You don't have to always be okay. You don't have to always be in control. Uncertainty is not a flaw. Change is not failure. When you let go of these invisible psychological biases, that's when you finally get to live as a full human being, growing, feeling, returning to yourself. And that is the deepest healing of all. You've walked with Montaigne through the shadows of uncertainty, contradiction, and vulnerability, not to avoid them, but to see them clearly and accept them. And perhaps now, you're realizing freedom doesn't come from understanding life completely. It comes the moment you stop trying to control it. That's not the end. That's when you finally begin to live, not to be perfect, but to be real. And in that realness, something gentle is waiting for you yourself.